Okay, we are going to be talking about Tchaikovsky and the ballet, which became an independent dramatic form during the 18th and 19th centuries, particularly in France and Russia, and mostly in Russia thanks to Peter Tchaikovsky. Now, back in the Renaissance, the choreographed dance known as the ballet was just really a little short something, part of larger festivals and theatrical entertainments. They even put them into the operas, and they were just kind of a filler at times. And it wasn't really until the 18th century that it became an independent art form. Now, the ballet especially in the Russian ballet, in the later 19th century was really thanks to Peter Tchaikovsky, who composed many instrumental works that really made it a very important genre all on its own. Tchaikovsky had a really love for the ballet and for the theater. He wrote Swan Lake, Sleeping Beauty, and the Nutcracker, all three of these ballets. They were all choreographed by the same person, and they quickly established him as a giant in the ballet world, and really, the big three as far as Russian ballet. This composer, Peter Tchaikovsky, and that's spelled Tchaikovsky. So it doesn't really look too much like Tchaikovsky, but that's how it's pronounced. He was born in 1840. He was the son of a Russian government official, and he went to the Conservatory of St. Petersburg at the age of 23, was studying music. He was immediately recommended by Anton Rubinstein, who was the director of the school, for a teaching post in the New Moscow Conservatory. And he spent 12 years there in Moscow, and produced some of his most successful works there. He was a very sensitive young man who had been, he had severe depression, attacks of depression. He also was homosexual, which at this time was extremely, very much so in the closet. And people just did not, view that as a proper lifestyle. And so he probably, due to this stigma, he married a student while he was at the conservatory, but then they separated. In 1877, Madame von Meck, who was a wealthy widow of an industrialist, sent him money so that he could go abroad and launch his career. Under her, probably because of his homosexuality, and also because of the rigid conventions of this time in her class, she had to be certain that they could never meet. So that was part of her stipulation, that they never met, even though she was his patron for the rest of his life. He was the first Russian whose music appealed to Western taste. It was performed in Vienna, Berlin, and in Paris. And in 1891, he was invited to participate in the inaugural concert of his music at Carnegie Hall in New York in 1891, when Carnegie Hall was first opened. 2 years later, he conducted his Pathetique Symphony in St. Petersburg, and his work was not very well received there. He died a few weeks later at the age of 53, and there were a lot of rumors, because of the way his last work had been kind of very lukewarmly received, that he possibly committed suicide. Most likely, he contracted cholera from tainted water, and so, most likely he did not commit suicide, but there is still some speculation that it could have happened. He wrote 8 operas during his lifetime, 3 ballets, several orchestral pieces, 7 symphonies, 3 piano concertos, violin concertos, some symphonic poems, overtures, chamber music and keyboard music, along with some choral music and some songs. So he had a very prolific career in his 53 years. Now, the ballet that we're going to talk about is probably, it's his most well-known. More than likely, you have heard some of this music. It's almost always played around Christmas. The music is very well known. The ballet itself is performed all over the world around Christmas. If you haven't ever seen it, I'll briefly tell you a little bit about the storyline, but it's based on a story of a little girl who is given a nutcracker doll by her godfather at Christmas. She loves this better than any of her other gifts. Her brother is jealous. He tries to take it away from her. They fight over it. He pulls the head off of the doll. And so she bandages it up with a scarf and ties it around, and then she falls asleep under the tree holding the doll. She awakens because the mice are scurrying around the Christmas tree, and they come to life. They grow in size. Her nutcracker doll comes to life, and he becomes he fights the Mouse King, which is a 3-headed Mouse King in many scenarios. He fights him and defeats the Mouse King. And so then he takes on his true self, which is the prince, who has been put under a spell by a witch. And so then he whisks her off to his homeland, where they are entertained by dancers from all over the world. And of course, the whole thing is a dream, and, you know, all of that. But the different dancers that entertain them then come from, you know, Russia and China and different places in the world. And so a lot of the music is very well known from these different little dances. Now, I have several selections for you to listen to. You'll hear a little bit of the Dance of the Sugar Plum Fairy, the Russian dancers, the Tchaikovsky dancers, which is the Russian dancers. I think I put the Chinese dancers on there. So there are 2 or 3 different dances that you'll listen to, as well as the Dance of the Sugar Plum Fairy. Now, there were 2 different instruments that were added to the symphony because of this. First is the celesta, which is a little almost sounds like a little music box kind of sound. It was a keyboard instrument that was created, and it was added for this for the Dance of the Sugar Plum Fairy. Then in the Russian dance, we get the addition of the tambourine, which we all recognize. So you'll hear both of these instruments that were added to the orchestra during this Nutcracker. And so now listen to both of these selections, or all 3 of them, and have a good time.